He didn't know it was impossible, so he did it. This quote describes someone who achieves greatness precisely because they refuse to accept their own limitations. And in combat sports, no athlete ever lived through that truth more than Alex Pereira.
You're talking about one of the most unusual championship fighters in the history of this sport.
Poatan doesn't follow the norm. Life never failed to throw hardship his way, and yet Alex, somehow, has always managed to succeed. So, with all the odds stacked against him, and plenty of people dictating what can or cannot be done, he made a career out of defying what seems unlikely. Poatan's backstory is pretty well known at this point, but that doesn't make it any less incredible. Battling alcoholism and the loss of a brother, Alex began training at age 22 in 2009. This, by itself, is already pretty remarkable. For context, Pereira first picked up a glove only a year before Adesanya made his professional kickboxing debut. Generally speaking, guys who reach the top of the sport go through decades of training, often from a very early age. But nothing in Poatan's career was ever ordinary. His athleticism and physical prowess allowed him to quickly dominate a sport where others had to spend years sharpening their skills.
If Alex Pereira wrestles for 2 years straight, nothing else, just wrestling, Alex Pereira, Olympic champion.
Sure, DC may have pushed it too far in that comparison, but as far as kickboxing goes, it worked out pretty well. It took him only 3 years of training to earn his first title in that sport, and over the next decade, Poatan would go on to have one of the most successful careers, beating Israel Adesanya twice and holding 2 titles simultaneously and glory. In fact, he was so successful that his eventual move to MMA at age 33 seemed like a horrible idea at the time. And for the longest time, he didn't really have a reason to do so. But as we all know, Izzy had to poke the bear.
He watches all my fights, and every time I fight, like clockwork, he'll try and put something out like, I beat this guy. But I've never ever watched any of his fights, ever. So at the end of the day, no one knows who the f he is. And he's gonna be that guy when I'm world champion, when I'm a legend. He's gonna be at some pub, talking some shit about, I beat that guy one time, trying to get a dick sucked from a crack some shit.
Adesanya and Pereira had a history in kickboxing. Sure, with 2 wins over Izzy, it was hard to call it a rivalry at the time, but Adesanya would go on to have tremendous success in the UFC, so when the unexpected call out from one of the best and most popular MMA fighters in the world happened, the move to a different sport started to make a lot more sense.
Aquele vídeo que postaram, né, uma entrevista que o Israel Adesanya fez, me motivou muito, né, desafiado. E quando eu sou desafiado, ninguém me segura.
But here's the deal though, Adesanya's success was the fruit of a cautious transition and build-up into MMA. His trajectory to the top of the middleweight division was handled with extreme care. He moved to the UFC when he had to, developed solid takedown and grappling defense skills while at it, and rose in the rankings the proper way. After all, we've all seen it happen before. A decorated striker gets in the UFC to prove themselves, only to be completely exposed due to the natural flaws in their game. Some of the best kickboxers ever, like Peter Arts and Gokhan Saki, tried and failed this experiment. Smaller gloves, different distance management, and defensive awareness. Everything is different in MMA, and that's without the obvious takedown threat.
This is a different sport, and I think that we learned that when James Toney went head-to-head with the former heavyweight champion of the world, Randy Couture. James was taken down instantly with what's known as a low single. A low single has never been used in MMA before because a low single would not work in MMA. But James Toney was so limited in his skills that Randy was able to hit it, take him down. James never got up.
So, in theory, Alex had little to no chance of reaching the same success as Adesanya in MMA. After only 1 bout in the LFA, he was pushed straight into the fire of the UFC. And here's the thing, his early career wasn't really fair to the rest of the division. The promotion was more than happy to fast-track him to the belt. The storyline added life to the middleweight division because fans wanted to see the rivalry play out in MMA. So, beating Bruno Silva and Sean Strickland was all it took to challenge for the middleweight title. Sure, Silva is a decent fighter, and Strickland would later prove himself to be elite. But that shouldn't be enough for someone with that little experience in MMA. It should have never worked. Let's be honest, the cost of living isn't just high, it's exhausting. And if you've been leaning on credit cards just to cover groceries, gas, and bills, you're paying a survival tax of 20% interest or more. Why keep handing that money to the big banks? My friends at American Financing have a better way. They're helping homeowners tap into their equity to pay off high-interest debt with mortgage rates currently in the 5s. On average, American Financing is saving their customers $800 a month. That's nearly 10 grand a year back in your pocket. It takes 10 minutes to find out what you could save, no upfront fees, and no obligation to talk to a salary-based mortgage consultant. And start today. You could even delay 2 mortgage payments. American Financing, America's home for home loans. 866-891-7332. That's 866-891-7332 or americanfinancing.net/markfighting. Adesanya and Pereira's fates seemed like they were intertwined, and in a way, they'll forever be.
Surely, yes, and I will fight him as many times as I'm asked to do. I beat him twice, and I say, I try to forget as much as possible. It's hard to forget, because that's part of my history.
For Izzy, the Brazilian was the perfect opponent to get him back into the spotlight. Despite the perfect record at middleweight, a streak of uneventful and somewhat boring decisions caused the champion's stock to go down slightly with the fans. So when Pereira came in, the contest suddenly made the 185-pound division interesting again. And while at it, the towering Brazilian, always sporting a 1,000-yard stare that looks like it could cut through stone, was starting to become a fan favorite. Again, in theory, this doesn't make any sense. Pereira doesn't speak a word of English, and most fans have barely seen him speaking at all. But one word was all it took to make him a superstar.
Chama! Chama! Chama, pô! Chama! Chama!
And a win over the new fan favorite would do wonders for the longevity of Adesanya as a popular champion. So when the two rivals finally met inside the cage at UFC 281, it looked like this was precisely the way things would work out. The champion nearly knocked Pereira out at the very end of the first round with a right hand. And while the Brazilian had some good moments throughout the fight, as the fight played out, it was obvious Alex was behind on the scorecards. So it seemed like the Pereira experiment was close to being over. Izzy, who made a career out of defensive prowess, only had to survive the next 5 minutes to retain his title. For Alex, he'd have to challenge the impossible once again to get the nod. And that is exactly what he did. Pereira went all out, as he needed to. After coming back from adversity in the first round and enduring a long match against the far more experienced mixed martial artist, Poatan gave everything he had in the last 5 minutes.
The corner in Pereira's corner that round, it was like straight out of a movie. I want to hear what the corner work's going to be, so I put the headphones on, and one of his trainers, I don't know who it was like, "You're losing this fight. You need to knock him out in this round. You have to move forward. You have to throw punches and bunches. You have to throw combinations. Let your hands go. You're going to be a world champion in 5 minutes." And then he gets up and goes out there, and it was seriously straight out of a movie.
And the Brazilian's power turned out to be too much for Adesanya. After a flurry of punches that had him nearly out on his feet, Mark Goddard called the fight. Now, Izzy had to sit with the bitter taste of a third loss against his lifelong foe. As for Poatan, the so-called old yet inexperienced kickboxer had reached the highest point of the sport.
Chama!
Poatan was a champion that shouldn't have been. So far, everything had played out in his favor, but the story was far from over. As a longtime champion with multiple defenses, Adesanya was due for an immediate rematch. Adesanya was in direct competition with Pereira for a decade, and for his fourth and final shot, Izzy claimed to have finally figured him out.
It's the hand. I blocked his eye. Boom. I hit it. Yeah. I know what to do. I know what to do next time.
The UFC put together the rematch in a couple of months, and this time, the fight was bigger than ever. Fans debated whether Poatan's championship signaled the end of the career of one of the best middleweight champions of all time. Meanwhile, Izzy knew this was the last shot he'd get at the Brazilian.
He who laughs last, laughs best, and I'm gonna have the last laugh.
When UFC 287 came, the stage was set for one of the biggest fights ever at 185 pounds. On fight week, Poatan was extremely relaxed, often seen joking with fans and the media. Adesanya, however, had only one thing in mind.
This fight, like I've said, this is my 8-mile moment. This is it. One more shot at this. I put everything on my back. I've done everything in my power to make sure I do the worst thing to this man this weekend.
And when the two rivals met again, Izzy finally got what he wanted. In less than 2 rounds, Pereira was lying flat, unconscious on the canvas. The very shot that nearly knocked him out in the first round of their first fight ended up being the one that sealed his downfall in the rematch, precisely as Adesanya predicted. And just like that, order seemed to have returned to the middleweight division. Adesanya reclaimed his middleweight title, and not only that, he served his biggest rival the most violent loss of his career. Pereira was 35 years old at the time, a seasoned veteran with more than 50 fights across multiple combat sports. The end of the road looked near for him. Poatan was a fun, one-hit wonder gimmick, a cool experiment that momentarily gave life to a stale division. Getting back on the horse meant actually going through the division this time around. His back was against the wall, but little did we know, that's when he does his best work. After the defeat, Pereira even pushed for an immediate rematch with Izzy, but that ship had sailed.
I don't keep score. I settle them.
But I'm gonna
now
say-
it's settled. Look, I gave him a fast track to the belt. You know, I could have said, nah, fuck no. Who has he fought? Like, he fought one top 5. Nah, but, you know, he did well, fought some all right guys, and beat the Strickland. I was like, okay, fine. There's no one else. But also, I was looking for that challenge. The guy that beat me in kickboxing, I was looking for that challenge. That's why I took that fight. The rematch, I got the immediate rematch because of what I've done in this game. I won the belt against Kevin. I defended against Rob, Romero, Costa, Vittori, Rob again, Cannonier. That's 7. My other belt will have 7 M's on it, you know? So I did the hard yards, and I earned my rematch, you know? Now he's got to do the hard yards if he wants to do that, but I don't think it's gonna, because he go cause problems at 205, and luck to everybody else, because he's a to deal with.
Not getting any younger, the clock was definitely ticking, so the move to light heavyweight came quickly. But how would the Brazilian fare in a division with guys who were stronger and hit harder? The Adesanya rematch exposed the limits of his durability. At 205, those limits would be pushed even further. We've seen many fighters changing weight classes in the latter part of their careers, and it rarely works. So when Alex stepped up to face former champion Jan Blachowicz, the Brazilian would finally face someone capable and willing to mix the martial arts. Pereira's grappling was finally tested against a veteran of the sport, and despite giving up a few takedowns, the Brazilian got back to his feet each time.
Alex Pereira gets the win by a razor-close split decision victory.
205 was so thin at the time that this close decision over Blachowicz was enough to earn his next shot. With a lack of star power, the UFC found in Alex one of the few big stars of the modern era of MMA. So once again, Pereira speed ran right into the title. And the move was significant. After all, this was likely Poatan's last shot at something significant in MMA, and to say he made the most of it would be an understatement. In his first shot at the light heavyweight belt, he faced a familiar face, Jiri Prochazka, the same man who took the belt from his friend and coach, Glover Teixeira. When the two met for the first time at UFC 295, Pereira got it done inside 2 rounds. Though some argue the stoppage came too soon, Pereira was the new 205 champion. And this accomplishment by itself was extraordinary. With only 6 UFC bouts spanning less than 2 years, the Brazilian kickboxer managed to win not 1, but 2 world titles in different divisions.
Alex Pereira gets the job done, and it's really now settling in how accomplished Alex Pereira is in MMA, being a 2-division champion after coming over from kickboxing. It's like, man, the kickboxers, if anything, have a harder time acclimating to mixed martial arts than the wrestlers. Like, there have been so many wrestling champs that have come out of a high level of wrestling, right? And Alex Pereira, it's even more impressive that he transitioned over to MMA in his early to mid 30s.
He would soon turn 37, so his time to make even more history in the division was running out. And with that, one of the most electrifying title runs in the history of light heavyweight began. Poatan became the biggest name in the sport, and the UFC wasn't shy about using him as its most important asset. In his very next appearance, he defended his belt against Jamal Hill at UFC 300. No more than a few weeks later, Alex showed up on short notice to replace Conor McGregor as the main event of UFC 303. He was the A-side of the 2 most important cards of the year. In only 11 months, Pereira had won the belt, not only beating but finishing guys like Hill, Roundtree, and Prochazka twice.
What this guy has done is unbelievable. Not just in, if you want to compare, and the way he's done it. The way he's done it. I mean, this guy destroys everybody.
It's crazy to think Pereira stacked up as many defenses as Daniel Cormier at 205, and he did it in less than a year. He seemed unstoppable, but his very next challenge would be the one to shatter his momentum. His very next opponent was Magomed Ankalaev, widely seen as someone who should have had a shot at the belt long ago. Despite becoming a double champ, there was still one criticism surrounding Alex's game. He never really faced someone with a real takedown threat. And while Ank is primarily a striker, he's Dagestani. He has decent wrestling, and he has the beard, so it is as close as it gets to an elite wrestler at modern-day light heavyweight.
Then why has nobody done this to him in MMA?
Because he only fights strikers.
He doesn't know.
Put him on Ankalaev. Yes, put him against Ankalaev.
You think Ankalaev take him down?
Of course, easy.
Many claim that Ankalaev's title aspirations were shelved by the UFC because he's far from a fan-favorite fighter. Even with his size, Magomed has mostly decision victories, and while he's similar to Pereira in the sense that he doesn't speak a word of English, the former is far, far less charismatic. The only traction Ank seems to get is on Twitter, and even then, many people accuse his manager, Ali Abdelaziz, of being the one actually talking trash on the platform.
Many days back, when I was in PI, he went there around me and he said hello. I said hi. So then I understand he's just a kid. Somebody else writing the tweets, so he's not responsible for that.
But despite all that, Ankalaev and Pereira generated some of the most interesting moments. So much so that the feud between the two would end up being Alex's biggest rivalry at 205.
I'd like to say that I see that in this fight, everyone is against me. Everyone's saying Shama, Shama, Shama. But guess what? Shama time is over.
And when Pereira and Ankalaev met at UFC 313, the challenger backed up all the trash talk. While Poatan was able to stuff the takedowns, he looked nothing like the world beater we had seen in his previous performances. He was slower and flat-footed. Most importantly, his killer instinct was all but gone. But Alex would have yet another chance to rewrite history. The rematch was scheduled to happen only a few months after their first fight, and this time, the build-up and verbal warfare grew even larger.
Whether or not he stays in the sport or decides to go back to the tire shop, that's going to be up to him. He's going to be the one that has to make that decision.
Forcing someone to relive the darkest time of one's life, when he was mourning a brother, battling with alcoholism, and dealing with extreme poverty, is enough to break a man. But the biggest blunder of that clip was assuming Alex ever had a decision to make. Pereira had his back against the wall for his entire life, and now he had to go against the odds once again. He had to beat a younger, more well-rounded fighter who had already beaten him. Back against the wall, again. Indeed, a highly unlikely scenario. So when the rematch took place, Poatan completely ran through him.
This was the fastest fight of his MMA career. This was the... Dude, do you understand the level of history you are looking at there? That is... Understand the broader context, what we've just been setting. And that was the fastest fight, not merely of his UFC campaign, of his MMA career. That is insane. 38, oldest champion, fastest fight of his whole career, fastest of the UFC, trying to reclaim a belt. This motherfucker is historically unusual in every way.
Pushing 40, Pereira once again challenged the norm in MMA. He accomplished so much in so little time that now there's almost nothing left to prove. And yet, Alex is ready to toy with the impossible one last time. The odd thing about Pereira is that he became so big that whenever he steps away, a vacuum is left behind. Izzy, and the middleweight division, for that matter, were never truly the same after he left, and now 205 is bound to suffer the same fate.
We were first introduced to him as a multiple-time Glory Kickboxing champion. Then he crosses over into the world of UFC, Shortly thereafter, he wins the middleweight title. Then he moves up to 205. He wins that belt, and now he's going for a third.
Pereira is, in many ways, the UFC's most inconvenient champion, a fighter whose rise makes his division feel too small to contain him. And his next move will likely be the biggest gamble of his career. Poatan will look to become the first to hold UFC belts in 3 different divisions: middleweight, light heavy, and now heavyweight. The Brazilian will be at the co-main event of the most anticipated card of the year at the White House in June. And to say he has his work cut out for him doesn't even scratch the surface. Pereira will be the smaller man for the first time in his life, and in front of him, one of the most athletic and dangerous heavyweights today, Ciryl Gane.
Gane's no joke, and Gane can dance around him. Gane's slick, can knock him out as well. But I think Alex can knock him out too.
The interim title will be on the line, as well as the chance of being the first triple champ in history. But maybe the jump to heavyweight will be a bridge too far for him. Poatan got rocked against Ankalaev in round 3, so how could his chin hold up well in the division with the hardest hitters? He will be the smaller man for the first time, stepping into the division with the hardest hitters on the planet, nearly 40 years old, with over 50 fights on his body. It looks impossible, but maybe Poatan doesn't know it is. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please hit that like and subscribe. And if you want to see our story about the 7 most chaotic UFC events ever, check out this next video.